This week, I'm going to show you how to make this heart garland just in time for Valentine's Day. This one's for you, Stacy Brooklyn on TikTok. Thank you for being so supportive. Hi, I'm Christine, the artist behind Arlissa Designs, and I'm happy you're here. Welcome. I have a Glowforge engraver and cutter, so I started in the Glowforge app by creating these hearts that I cut out, and I did a couple of different ones. But I also want to cut some plain ones and then add some hand-painted flowers on them. And because it's almost Valentine's Day, I'm going to use pinks and greens, which is not my usual color palette, but I figured it's appropriate, and sometimes you got to step out of your box, right? I'm not going to put anything directly related to Valentine's Day because a lot of people just love hearts in general, but I am going to use the colors, and that way I can leave them in my booth after Valentine's Day. Here I'm just using a little alcohol to remove some of the burn marks. Sometimes I leave them depending on the project, and you could use masking tape to keep the etching clean, to keep the wood around the etching clean, but I hate peeling the tape, and I really do love that rustic look of a little bit of the burn mark. On this project, I removed some of it, but I'm not going to worry too much about getting all of it perfect, especially since I'm painting the backs to kind of cover up that little bit that's difficult to remove, and also to give it a more finished look. I'm using, I believe it's a soft ivory, and I usually go with the grain because it gives more of a smooth matte look. And I have a tip for cleaning up the outside edge if you go over and get paint, but I'll show you that when we're done painting both sides. The ones that are etched, I'm going to leave unpainted on the front side though. And I will just say that while I'm recording this, you'll hear garbage trucks and kids running down the street, and it's like a hurricane outside today. It's chilly in Fort Lauderdale, and it's time for the kids to be let out of school, and it's garbage day, so you know, it's life. Probably the dog will bark every now and then. But here are the 5 that I'm going to use in my garland. These are the back sides, and I'm going to flip them over and paint 3 of the fronts, and the other 2 that I just took away have the etching on the front. So I'm going to paint, one here is a bright red. Like, that's literally what it's called. I don't remember what brand of paint it is, but it's called bright red. And it certainly is bright. I love it. And all 3 of the paints that I'm using today get pretty good coverage. Sometimes you have to go over everything with a second coat, but I kind of like some of the wood grain showing through. I'm not going to get a lot of that with the red and the magenta that I'm going to use, but you can by mixing a little bit of water in, or Floetrol, or even a little bit of matte gel medium sometimes I mix in. I like that wood grain, more of a washed look sometimes in some projects, but these I want them to be bright and happy, so. But I'm still only going to do 1 coat, so it's all that is needed here. While I finish painting this last one, I'll tell you that I recorded most of this video and did most of the voiceover when I ran out of storage. So I had to sit for about an hour or a little more deleting photos and videos, and I deleted the whole video that I had already started. So this is a second run. These are the problems that you can have when creating a YouTube channel. I was so frustrated, but we're moving along nicely here, and I'm already into the pink, which makes me extremely happy. I'm not a pink girl, but for whatever reason, this magenta is one of my favorite colors. In fact, I use this against my blue colors as a contrast in a lot of my pieces. So it is part of my usual palette. The red and the off-white, well, at least the red is not, but this magenta, you can find it everywhere in my projects. So that's done, and now I'm just, sometimes I will draw things out first, but today I'm just going to go for it with a paintbrush. And I don't even know what I'm painting. I'm just, I don't know, just going for it and just hand paint and have fun and enjoy it. because if you make a mistake, you can always take a little bit of the background color and paint over it, which I did in a couple of places here. So there's no worries about messing everything up. You can just wing it and touch it up later. A good practice, especially if you're going to paint something like this flower that's this large on that red background, is to do it in white, or in this case, I'm using the soft linen. Is that what it's called? Soft linen, I think. Anyway, because it will help that color show up more. You can paint the color directly on there, but sometimes then you'll have to do 2-3 coats. But if you do this in a white or a light color, the color that you put on top of it goes on easier. Does that make sense? I don't know. Words are difficult today. But originally I was going to just leave this white, but you'll see later that I go over it with a little bit more color. If you don't like to hand paint, you can do this in other ways as well. You can use stickers, although a lot of times when I put stickers on wood, it doesn't stick very well. So a good trick is to go ahead and seal it and then apply your sticker when the sealer is dry, and then go back and seal it again so that your sticker's not going to come off later in the future. You can also use stencils, or sometimes I've taken the shape, like the heart shape that we have here, and traced it on some scrapbooking paper, and you can Mod Podge it right on the wood. And there's a new idea that I'm really super excited to try, and I'll be ordering some soon and we'll see what happens. I'll do a video. But I'll have to go back and find the person. I don't know whether it was on TikTok or YouTube, but I saw someone using temporary tattoos. So I'm really excited to try that. And I know that Skylar has a stack of temporary tattoos around here somewhere, which are probably not the kind that I really want to use, but a good idea for playing around and practicing and seeing how well they go down. So don't tell Skylar. I'll take a few that I know she really doesn't like, or that she won't miss. But anyway, so I finished the red one. I always add an odd number of things. So you see I did 3 little flowers, and in the end you'll see it'll all balance out when I do the border. And now I'm just painting some stems, and I'm going to do some pretty little flowers here, and I'll just keep playing around with this until it fills the heart and I get it to the point where I like it. Of course, right away I messed up the green stem. I'm not using the normal paintbrush. I don't know why I'm painting like this today. I guess because the camera's on, but this is not normally how I paint, and this is not the paintbrush I usually use, so I don't know, but I'll just work on it until it looks the way I want it to. You can use paint pens for this too if you're not a painter, but like with the stickers, if you're going to use paint pens, it's best to seal it, at least in my experience, just because it fills in a lot of the grain of the wood and gives you a smoother surface. A lot of times I'll go in with a fine tip pen. You can even use Sharpies, but you have to be careful when you do the sealer. If you're going to do a spray sealer, totally fine. If you're not, sometimes it will smear, so it's a good idea to use a fixative before you seal it if you're going to use a brush. Also, if you're going to use something that may move when you seal it, it's best to do a really light sealer coat and then come back in and do another second sealer. That way you're not getting it too wet the first time, and I've had that where my ink spreads out while the sealer's drying. So I don't know, that's what I've learned the hard way. So now, as a normal practice, I will always seal things with a thin, light coat and then go back for a second coat. And if you want a really super smooth surface, then you can either sand this down lightly with a fine sander or add more of a sealer coat. I like using the matte gel medium because it does give you it's a little bit thicker and it's a smooth surface, but you're brushing that on, so definitely don't want to do that with some ink that's going to move around. While I finish these, if you watched last week's video, I talked about ideas and my plans for the new year. And I have, oh, first, you see here, I'm kind of going back in with that off-white color, the soft linen, and thinning out my stem. So that's how to erase your mistakes. It's not always perfect, but it helps. Anyway, so one thing that I'm going to be trying to do is on Mondays, I will turn on the camera to make my master boards. I had a couple of people reach out to me and tell me how much they love seeing the creation of the master boards. So typically at the beginning of the week, I'll figure out what my projects are and do a couple of master boards that I can cut up or use for the backgrounds for my 5x7 matted pieces. That's the only size I'm working in now. Once I fill my baskets in my booth with my matted originals, I'll go to a different size, but I usually create those in the beginning of the week so I can cut them up and I can use them for handmade greeting cards or the backgrounds for something else. I can also make tags out of them or bookmarks. So I'll just turn on the camera on Mondays and do Monday master boards. And then at some point, I'd like to add tips, maybe Tuesday tips, because I'm constantly learning lessons as I go. And then that way I can film them as they happen, so I don't have to make a list and go back and refer to it. I'll just turn the camera on every time I have an aha moment, and it'll be a real short video, maybe not a short, maybe a little bit longer than a short, or it might be a short, and I can share them with you. And maybe you won't have to learn the hard way like I do. So that's my plan for now. It's always evolving, but I really do like some of those tips and tricks that I learned from other YouTube artists and crafters. And I always thought it would be great to have a playlist where it's just quick. You don't have to wait for, 20 minutes of a video to get to the tip, or it's embedded somewhere in the video. I'd like to take those out and make a playlist of real short, quick, easy tips from things that I learn. Let me know in the comments below if you think that's a good idea. And I will try to add that to what I'm already doing and be consistent. So here I'm just on the last ones that I created. I have 5 in my painted tree booth in Cooper City, Florida right now. And I didn't do a heart. As a matter of fact, I didn't do these hand painted hearts the way I'm doing them now. I couldn't remember what I did, so I'm just doing something new. So when this one goes to the booth, it'll be the one that's, they're all mixed up and different, but I did the painting all the same on them. So this one will be different. So we'll see which one sells first. Okay, I'm going to speed this up now because you get the idea. Just take your paintbrushes out, your pens, whatever, and just play around until you get it the way you want it. Stickers, paper, whatever. And if you make a mistake, again, you can just cover it up. I usually take a Sharpie, sorry, not a Sharpie, this is a Posca, and go around the edges, especially if it's light colors like this. And that's why I love the linen and the off-white, because then you still can see the outlines from the white pen. And then I always love to go and add some stitching around the edge. And you can do this in so many ways. You could do just like a straight stitch like I did here, or you could do dots. I've done X's before, or little sideways slashed lines. I just love to have a border around it. A really cool, another idea is to do some vines. So you can do a very simple inside and then do the vine with the green around the edge instead. And as you see here, I did dots on that last one. Now, because it's so cold and windy outside, I decided to seal these inside. I usually use a spray sealer, but I'm going to use the matte medium today because I don't want things blowing around and getting into the sealer. and then you have to sand it and redo it. So today we're staying inside, and fortunately I just have this one garland that I'm working on, so it's not a big deal. Okay, let's put this thing together. I have one long rope and 5 short ropes, and this little needle I created from some picture wire. I just folded it in half and used my pliers to flatten the end so it'll go through the beads. And you don't need glue, but I use it because I overkill everything so that things don't come apart. So I just took the short rope and tied a little knot in the top. Then I used my little makeshift needle that I created and put it through the loop. And then through the bead. And then I always put it through the front of whatever I'm threading the rope through. And then you can take the needle off and pull the bead through the loop and tighten it. And later, when you put this on the long piece of rope, the way you pull that through and tighten it through the hole of the heart, you can just twist it around a little bit and twist the bead around a little bit to make them hang straight. So let's do that again. I take the short rope, tie a knot in the top, put the little needle through the loop and through the front of the heart. And then I forgot to put the bead. So put the bead on. You don't have to, but I think that that's the easiest way. So every time you start a project like this, you're going to have to go back and remember how you did it before. So here's a tip that will end up on Quick Tip Tuesdays. That's hard to say. Always keep a notebook of how you do things, your measurements. So I have the measurements of the ropes written down, and any details that might help you when you go back to redo it. But every time I go back to do a project again, I have to remember. So here we go. One more try. The short rope, tie a knot in the top, put the makeshift needle on, thread it through the bead and through the front of the heart. Pull the bead and the knot through the loop, pull it tight, and then push the bead down. There you go, 5 times. And this is what it looks like. And you don't have to, you can do so many different things. You can add more beads, you can add different types of beads. The possibilities are endless. So now I'm going to measure 6 inches from the end, and that's going to be your loop for hanging. And then I fold it over and put the end at the 6-inch mark. And I add a little tacky glue. You don't have to, because that bead's going to hold it pretty tight, but I like to add a little tacky glue to dry later, and I add a little drop of hot glue. And be careful, it's hot. You're going to see me burn myself here. I do it every single time, but I like that because it really stops the bead from going past that point, and it's a pretty strong loop when you're done. So then I'm going to thread that bead, and these are smaller beads than the ones that I used before. And then I use my pliers because it's really hard. You might want to play around with the rope and make sure it's going to go through the bead. This will barely go through, but the pliers help pull it. And then I pull it all the way to that point where I put the tacky glue and the little bead of hot glue. As you can see, it's very difficult to push it to the end, but this one goes. It just takes a little muscle. And you don't have to use this kind of rope. You can use twine or something different. I love the look of this rope. Then I put a little dot of hot glue on each side of the bead where the rope comes out, and a tiny drop. And if you get too much all over it, you could just clean it up a little bit. But I like to do this because I tested it and pulled really hard on this loop, and they don't come undone. So it's there for good. Okay, now this time we're going to create another little loop, but not close it because I'm adding, let's see, there's 12 beads all together. So there's a bead on each end of the loop like that we just put on the first loop. And then I put 2 beads for each hanging heart. And that just keeps the hearts in place so they don't just all fall down towards the middle. But I don't glue them on, so they are adjustable. And they stay. This is one reason why I like using this rope, even though it's hard to pull the beads on, because, and I'll have to try and figure out what size rope this is. I think I ordered them on Amazon, so I'll put the affiliate link down below in the description. But this one, I have 2 different sizes of rope, and the other one was just too thick. I love the thick rope, but it does not work for this. So I'll try and put that down in the description. But these are tight enough on the rope that they won't slide around. And so however you hang your garland, you can adjust your heart and spread them out, or you can bring them in a little closer, and those beads help to hold the hearts in place wherever you want to put them. So 12 beads all together. 2 are the ones at the ends of the garland. So I put the end one on by mistake, so I'm going to take it off and then create our 6-inch loop. Add the glue. Trying to add the glue. A little tiny bit of hot glue, and I burned myself right there. And then we're gonna put our little needle through the loop and put the last bead on. Now, you're gonna do this so many times. It makes me so mad. I pulled it past that loop, so then you have to pull it apart, take the bead off, and start the process all over again. And I'm not joking when I tell you that the last time I was making these garlands, I had to do it on one of the garlands like 4 or 5 times in a row. I was so mad. But, you know, you just keep going. Take it apart, redo it, take it apart. And then eventually you learn to be very careful, which I'm not doing here because I want it to go all the way past the end of that rope so you don't see any coming through on the other side. But it's a miracle. Success. And then I do my tiny little dot of hot glue on both. There, I burned myself again. On both sides, so that bead and that loop will not come off. And then if you're messy like me, you can just try and burn yourself again. No, try and just, it's cool enough now. You could just clean it off a little bit and make sure it looks nice and neat. And then this is a little awkward. My daughter came in to help me film this, and excuse my mess in the background because I've got lots of projects going on and lots of lists of collages, and actually those are old lists and I need to change them for this month. But here I'm just separating 2 beads each for each heart, and you see how they stay very nicely. And I'm going to slide each heart over all the beads and in between the first 2 beads, and then each one in between the next 2 beads. And you want to lay these out and make sure that you have them in the right order before you start this, because again, I've done that a few times where I finished the garland and all the color ones that I painted were on one side. Not you get it. So just think ahead. So here it is, finished. I hope you liked this project. If you did, let me know in the comments, and like and subscribe and send it to someone who might also like it. I will see you maybe on Monday Masterboards next week, and I hope you all have a great weekend. Thanks for watching.